Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Red Raptor Writes. I am here on a very special occasion. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man just turned 20 years old. Saying that makes me feel like an old man, but it's true. This is one of those few golden movies from my childhood that I've watched over and over and over.
Again and again and again until we're both dead.
Even to this very day, I'm down to watch it anytime. Even if I just finished watching Spider-Man. I won't even mess around with you and give you those rhetorical questions you'd expect from an intro. Oh, is it still good? Does it stand the test of time? That sort of stuff. Spider-Man certainly still holds up today to be enjoyed by pretty much anybody, whether you grew up with it or not. There's so much director Sam Raimi and writer David Koepp got right about this character and the city he protects. Nowadays, the announcement of a Sony movie with Spidey characters feels like a threat more than anything else, but back in 2002, so much justice was done for them. For me personally, Tobey's portrayal is still my favorite in live action, and I think there are many valid arguments as to why he's still the best. I won't get into that too much here, but it must mean something when 2 attempts, 5 movies, and 20 years later, Tobey is still king. So, what did they do so well back in 2002? Why do so many, myself included, still love Spider-Man? Let's dig this up. Because pretty much everybody and their mothers knows the story of Spider-Man, we can jump to talking about the character himself. You know Peter's a high school loser who gets bitten by a spider, he gets powers, acts irresponsibly, gets his uncle killed, vows to use his powers for good, and fights the Green Goblin. What makes the Raimi movies so instantly successful in my eyes is how well the writers understood the character when translating him to the big screen. If someone from North Korea who's never heard of Spider-Man before somehow escaped and walked into a theater with a Korean translation, they would get it. They'd understand who he is and why he does what he does. Spider-Man isn't some crazy billionaire, an alien, or he wasn't born with magical powers. No, he's just an average guy, a smart average guy, but a regular dude like you and me. Peter Parker only attains his powers through a freak accident that could have happened to anyone. There was no stupid Chosen One story or already established superhero to set him up. Nope. As the sequel put it,
he's just a kid.
The wall crawler is an everyman. Anybody could be under the mask, symbolizing how any average Joe can wake up one day and decide to do some good for the world. You don't have to be part of some overly complicated and unfinished Chosen One story to help others.
It is evolving, just backwards.
Sam Raimi captured that perfectly. Here, Peter is a shy nerd who's constantly down on his luck, pretty much the lowest of the low. So if he can do something great, then anyone can. Tobey Maguire's portrayal is spot on. He's able to play the awkward nice guy so well.
I cried like a baby when you played Cinderella.
Peter, that was first grade.
Peter is soft-spoken, kinda stiff, has a goofy smile, so he's weird but in a charming way, not in a hope he doesn't reach into his backpack sort of way. I have to appreciate that although we like this kid and sympathize with him, Peter's not the perfect angel. Just the right amount of angst is given to develop his character, but not to turn him into an unlikable prick. He does the normal Spider-Man things like coming home late, not stopping the robber, humiliating people, that sort of stuff. But then he gets into this spat with Uncle Ben, and I just feel so bad for the guy.
And I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
I've noticed this problem with movie writers nowadays, how they often want their protagonists to be squeaky clean. Well, not here. This brings me right to the point that we're able to see the different sides to Spidey here. He's not supposed to be a never-ending joke machine that takes nothing seriously. No, that's more Deadpool. There's certainly a sense of fun and excitement, giving off such an enjoyable, lighthearted feel that the audience instantly wants to web swing after watching. However, we get to see the rage come out too. There are times in the comics when Peter wants to rip someone's head off, which is sorely lacking from many of the future attempts. When catching Uncle Ben's killer, here named Dennis Carradine, and in the final confrontation with the Goblin. Dang, 20 years later and I'm still on the edge of my seat every time. Also, I should mention this common complaint that this interpretation doesn't joke enough.
serious?
That's one of those arguments that's completely false, but has been circulated around the internet enough times for people to pretend it's true. With most people who he's not comfortable with, Peter's the quiet guy. With Uncle Ben though and his family, we see some wholesome banter, but whenever he dons the mask, he's joke-cracking and fun-loving. In situations when nobody's in danger, or really nobody else but him, he's willing to mouth off. But when the dookie hits the fan and the crap gets real, Spidey shuts the Shrek up to fight. So I really don't get what the problem is here. Should he be making quips and jokes when everyone's about to die? Lastly, I'd just like to add that we got a perfect look at what motivates Peter to be Spider-Man. Okay, I can keep saying unlike the other films over and over, but I won't, because the 2002 movie holds up perfectly well on its own, even without comparisons to the lesser versions of the future. We can be here all day doing that, but yeah, we can clearly see how Peter's motivated by guilt. Guilt that when he wasn't being responsible, he got Uncle Ben killed. He's Spider-Man as a way to atone for his mistake, and to make his uncle proud. Sam Raimi, David Koepp, and Tobey Maguire clearly knew what they were doing. One thing that I love so much about the Raimi trilogy is how lively the world and its characters feel. Plenty of love and attention are given to everyone, not just Spider-Man. Let me get this out of the way first. Mary Jane. She's one of the most controversial parts of this movie and the entire trilogy. Aside from Spider-Man 3, the criticisms are largely unwarranted in my opinion. I'll admit that it is annoying how she needs to constantly be saved. Otherwise, she's still great. I appreciate what was done with her. Yeah, MJ's supposed to be the ultimate catch popular girl, but the writers chose to do more than that. Yeah, she's popular. Yeah, she's way out of Peter's league. However, that personality she puts on is her mask. That's actually a great comparison to Peter. They're both pretty dorky and awkward, though they choose these exciting masks.
No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
I don't know, something to think about. In the first film, MJ is largely defined by her abusive home life. A terrible relationship with her dad causes her to find love in the wrong places, going for guys who only value her as arm candy, not actually caring about her as a person, what's underneath the mask. So then when she's with Peter, he's the only guy who truly cares for her. He listens to her dreams and constantly encourages her to chase them. You can tell how nervous she looks saying that she wants to act, like she's not used to people actually caring or paying attention to what she has to say. By the resolution, Mary Jane realizes this is what she needs from a relationship, but it conflicts with Peter's arc of learning responsibility. He makes the selfless choice by keeping her out of harm's way, despite how much he cares. This conflict gets resolved in the sequel, though I feel the relationship is good here too. Is some of the dialogue between the two clunky? Yeah, sure. I can look past it though, since they are awkward teenagers who don't know what normal socializing looks like. Harry is another great addition. Of course, I'd never condone the poor life choices of James Franco, though I have to admit, I love him as an actor in these. He either seems really drowsy or over the top, and it's great, especially for a deranged character like this. I like a lot of the character work in this one. The dynamic between him, Peter, and Norman is well executed. Because of his intelligence, Norman views Peter as the son he never had, while his actual son is a failure who flunks out of school. It's made very clear how Norman has little love for Harry, probably willing to ditch him for Peter. We can talk a little more about that in the villain section, but this clearly rubs Harry the wrong way, so he gets back at his friend by dating MJ. It's amazing how well these character dynamics work within Spider-Man alone, but also set up lots of great drama for the sequels. Harry, being a failure in his father's eyes, tries to finally win that love post-mortem by avenging his death, ultimately driving him to madness. We know how this gets messed up in Spider-Man 3, but still, the build-up was perfect. As for Aunt May and Uncle Ben, really, what can I say about them that hasn't been said before? Both Rosemary Harris and the late Cliff Robertson were perfectly casted. These are genuine wholesome elders who I'd love to spend an afternoon with watching the Yankees and eating homemade cookies. Aunt May is given more to do in the sequels, having the best scenes for both, so Uncle Ben takes the lead here. Yeah, this character was good enough to teach the moral to an entire generation. In the few short scenes we got of him, I was still sold on his relationship to Peter and Aunt May. At this point in his life, Ben's down on his luck, looking for a job. He feels he doesn't fit into this modernizing world, but still wants to provide for his family. What a Chad. Each time I rewatch Spider-Man, I pray that it's some alternate cut where he lives because we're that invested that quickly. Another thing you'll notice here is how efficient Sam Raimi is with his scenes, being able to accomplish so much in so little time, nothing short of brilliant. Anyway, we're so lucky that the character came out the way he did, since he'd become the emotional center of the entire trilogy, bringing Peter his motivation for being a hero. Then there's J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. Like, seriously, do I even need to mention how amazing he is in the role? There's a reason why he had to be brought back for the MCU, cause there's no one who can command the role like him. The Daily Bugle scenes are wacky, fast-paced, and lively. Jameson yelling at everyone just makes everything better. But I can't forget that Raimi adds depth to so many of his characters. Jameson isn't just some angry guy at the Bugle. No, we see that despite his hardened exterior, he's a guy who's willing to stick his neck out for his workers, even risking his own life to protect Peter.
Who's the photographer who takes the pictures of Spider-Man?
I don't know who he is. His stuff comes in the mail.
You're lying!
I swear.
It's small moments like this that bring everyone leaping off the screen, and I can't mention the side characters without going into the colorful world of New York, because really it's made into a character of its own, and it will be throughout the trilogy. When Peter first fights crime, there are a lot of mixed opinions. Some people love him, others hate him, even calling for his arrest. But by the film's climax, we see the everyday hero thing come to life. The normal kid from Queens who risked his life to save others, to do good, is rescued by the other normal New Yorkers. Spider-Man inspires others to take a stand against injustice in a really beautiful moment. It hits even harder when you remember that this movie came out just a couple of months after 9/11, when average New Yorkers were willing to band together and risk their lives to help others. We already know Spider-Man holds up, but looking back at it through this lens, dang. But again, New York's character arc is done well with a very emotional ending. As I've mentioned previously, the Green Goblin is the villain of this movie and arguably the main antagonist of the entire trilogy. Instantly, I have to note how much I love Willem Dafoe here. As lovable of an actor as he is in real life, I mean, the dude is already creepy. All he needed to do was crank that up to 100, which he certainly does. His performance can only be described as animalistic. The way he jumps around, bares his teeth, and gives these menacing laughs. This is a blockbuster with a ton of perfect casting already, but Dafoe still finds a way to stand out. Also, I'm usually not a fan of that over-the-top physical acting style you would see from, say, Jim Carrey. However, it's natural enough here to not get on my nerves. Plus, it isn't used for some goofy slapstick humor, but to make the Goblin feel, again, more animalistic. Now, with that being said, I enjoy the dichotomy between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. Peter is a kind-hearted kid who likes science and comic books. You could see that in his room. Norman is a creepy weirdo who collects these tribal masks. Peter's room is blue, Norman's is green. These are some cool details added to reflect their inner character. Spider-Man is learning to use his power for good instead of his own selfish gain. Norman gets anything he wants, killing anyone in his way. This already screwed up personality now gets to revel in wreaking havoc, doing whatever the heck he wants. Throughout the runtime, Norman constantly places himself in the role of father figure to Peter, of course ignoring his actual son, and he does the same as the Goblin. Instead, our protagonist learns to reject him as the abusive father he is, to embrace Uncle Ben, who he previously rejected. By the end, he fully commits to Ben and the wisdom he shared, rejecting the call to be a selfish prick. Good stuff. The confrontations between the two are also very good overall. The sequels do bring more interesting fight choreographies, though it still holds up here too. That Times Square fight is okay, maybe not grounded enough in actual hand-to-hand combat. Everything else though, excellent. That final battle, I struggle to find words. This is one of, if not the best fight scene in any superhero movie. It is so brutal, so violent, so intense. Not that the content is that crazy, but it makes you feel every punch. The absolute beatdown Peter gets is insane. Having him go to that low only makes it more satisfying when he gets the upper hand, defeating the Goblin. Another complaint given is on the Goblin suit, how it's Power Rangery. This is another one of those internet arguments that I don't feel holds any weight. It's not my favorite costume ever, not bad though. The Goblin is certainly still able to look menacing. Willem Dafoe also does a nice job acting through the suit, so I can't say I have a problem with it. When approaching this villain, there are a few options. He can try to talk through a mask like Spidey.
That's impossible.
The mask can be ditched like No Way Home to let Dafoe's face show at all times. Then that would ruin the reveal that he's the Goblin. Or they could have went with the Goblin armor as they did. Of the options presented, this is probably the best for the purposes of the character and story. Maybe a purple scarf or something would have made it feel more complete though. I will be fair and criticize that after murdering the Oscorp board and Quest, there isn't much motivation for him other than to wreak havoc and challenge Spider-Man. He's not trying to accomplish anything, or spread a message, or get revenge on anybody else. That's the only thing really holding him back in my mind from being one of the best in the genre. Needs a little more motivation. I'll just call this section Miscellaneous because there's so much greatness here that doesn't have a sentence count high enough to warrant its own section. Like the soundtrack. I've always said this and I'll say it again, I'm not a musical genius. I can say, however, that Danny Elfman provided one of the greatest soundtracks in the history of film. That's not even hyperbole, I'm dead serious. His Spider-Man theme makes you feel like you're crawling up walls, then swinging through the air. Then the Peter theme grounds you back into the tragedy of his life. The Goblin theme is so slept on. The way it starts off with this tribal sounding percussion to match the masks, then transitions into strings that bring out the uneasiness of his character, then builds into an explosive brass section. And everything in between these epic moments is still fantastic. It's one of those scores that you hear each track, then pinpoint exactly which scene it's from because it's woven in so perfectly. Something I admire so much about the Raimi trilogy is how it has its own distinct style, its own tone. Every scene feels like it's contained within the universe rather than trying to copy something else. Think about it, Spider-Man released right off the heels of The Matrix, Blade, and X-Men, yet chose to be this colorful, light-hearted comic movie. This is something that happens all too often. A new hit is released, so future films try to mimic that style to draw those fans. This happened after The Matrix, The Dark Knight, and The Avengers. These were the trendsetters, which unfortunately created many trend chasers. I've stated my frustrations with the MCU, how so many installments feel like they just fell off an assembly line, all needing to feel very samey. Going back to Spider-Man feels so special since it's so unique. Yes, it's fun and colorful, but then Raimi brings in his horror background at times, or lets the natural goofiness flow rather than taking itself too seriously. There's tons of humor, yes, I can quote these lines until the day I die, but it's all expertly balanced. Despite the criticisms, the Spider-Man trilogy does take itself seriously. It plays its characters and its story straight. We really do care about the drama. Most of the humor is naturally interwoven with the world and its characters. The story of Spider-Man is a depressing one, so this more than helps. Spider-Man's special effects are also pretty good. Yeah, some of the CGI looks out of place, but Sam Raimi definitely learned from Jurassic Park on this one. He knew not to rely on CGI, because then the entire thing would have looked outdated in a few short years. Nah, he blended these effects with practical ones. When one shot is done with computers, another will be practical, grounding everything in reality. Spider-Man's suit looks phenomenal. I know the Spider-Man 2 suit gets all the love, but personally, this one's my favorite. Anybody can look at this classic from any angle, whether it be the music, the special effects, the set design, costume design, and all that jazz, then come to the conclusion that this is fantastic. Yes, Spider-Man 2002 still holds up. In fact, it more than holds up. 20 years after its release, this is still the gold standard of comic book movies. This is the product you get when a stellar team of super talented visionaries come together to make a monument to something they love. It truly is a big budget passion project. 2 decades and dozens of watches in, and it's still just as amazing as the first time. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like, subscribe, and check out my social media. See you next time.